Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be talking about the one thing. Moving on to part 3 of the one thing called Extraordinary Results, Unlocking the Possibilities Within You. And we're going to start off with chapter 13, Living with a Purpose. And let's go to the first slide. I guess before we do that, part 2. So part 1 was the lies. Part 2 was all about the truth, the simple path. What did we talk about in part 2? Some of the things we talked about: the focusing question. We talked about goal setting and being in a specific quadrant. We talked about asking the focusing questions in different areas of your life. You can use it not just in like business, sports, but also in relationships or with your, I guess kids are a relationship too, or spiritual life, with hobbies, with CrossFit, with jujitsu, what I do. You can ask it in various facets of your life. You want to think big. All these topics talked about in the truth. And now in part 3, it's kind of like, how do you act on it? How do you get there? And the one thing that, it's funny, no pun intended there. The one thing that Gary and Jay kind of talk about here is this iceberg, and really what drives your productivity, what drives the actions that you take are the purpose and priority, with purpose being at the base. It's kind of like the notion that most of the iceberg is under the water. It's what you don't see. And it's huge. Like an iceberg is actually a really huge thing. So you could see a person's on the surface. You could see a person on the surface. And you could see that they are doing all these things. But you don't really, unless you look deeper, unless you ask questions of that person. And this is what Gary puts in the book. What you see is determined by what you don't see. So why is this person so driven and so motivated, constantly doing things, not having time for anything else? Well, you could look at it on the surface level and say, oh, he just doesn't want to talk to me, or he just wants to be away from. You can make up all kinds of excuses, but what you don't know is the underlying purpose behind all those actions. What Gary talks about is the more productive people are, the more purpose and priority are pushing them. And that's, again, on the deeper level. So Gary starts off chapter 13 talking about the book A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. So if you guys aren't familiar with the book, we've got this guy, Ebenezer Scrooge. He's constantly thinking about money or trying to hold on to money. He doesn't like letting money go. And one night, I believe on Christmas Eve, he's visited by this ghost of Jacob Marley, which used to be his former business partner. And Jacob Marley tells him he's going to be visited by 3 spirits: spirit of Christmas past, future, and current. So from these 3 spirits, he's going to find out a couple things: how he became the man he is, how his life is currently going, and what he is going to become, or what his life and the people that he knows around his life, what's going to happen to them. And what ends up happening, the 3 spirits visit him. It becomes a terrifying experience for Ebenezer Scrooge, and he starts to change his life. Scrooge realizes there is still time to alter his fate. And what ends up happening is instead of serving money, he starts to serve people and help people out. And what ends up happening is he starts to live with a different purpose than just money. Money doesn't become his only priority. People start to become not his only priority, but people start to become a priority for him. He gives his one employee a raise. He helps out his employees a kid. I remember Christmas Carol there was a Disney version of it with all those Disney characters, and Ebenezer Scrooge was like Donald Duck, or not Donald Duck, but you know what I mean. And then Mickey Mouse was in it. Yeah, that's the version of Christmas Carol I know. But ultimately, yeah, Scrooge changes. His purpose sets his priority. So his purpose in life is to now help people. So now he prioritizes using his money for good things and not just trying to gain more money. And he starts to become then more productive in that area, in obtaining money to help people. So Gary writes that purpose sets priority, and then that priority sets the productivity that you do. And then as we continue on to the next section, there's this story about the begging bowl. And in the begging bowl, there is this, what is it, a king? This beggar asks, a king asks a beggar, what do you want? The beggar laughingly says, you ask as though you can fulfill my desire. And the king gets offended, and he's like, of course I can. I'm a king. I have all this power. So the beggar warns him a little bit and says, okay, how about this? How about you fill this begging bowl? And the king just throws money at it, keeps throwing money at it. In the begging bowl, the money keeps disappearing in the begging bowl. So he's got to keep filling it up and keep filling it up and keep filling it up. And in the end, he loses just all of his money. He runs out. The begging bowl seems bottomless. And the king admits defeat and is like, what is the secret of this begging bowl? And the beggar humbly replies, there is no secret. It is simply made up of human desire. And Gary writes, one of our biggest challenges is making sure our life's purpose doesn't become a beggar's bowl, a bottomless pit of desire, continually searching for the next thing that will make us happy. That, my friends, is a losing proposition. So it's like you're seeking success just for the sake of success, the sake of fame. But let me tell you, that's a lot of times short-lived. You got to be doing something for greater than the money or the fame or whatever have you. What's the true purpose underlying things? Are you doing things for pleasure or are you doing things for purpose? And what Gary writes is when you get into this habit of just seeking that success just for the sake of success, you leave no time to enjoy anything. And you end up constantly thinking about the next thing. And it becomes a never-ending thing. Nothing will ever be enough for you. So there is this psychologist, Dr. Martin Seligman, past president of the American Psychological Association, who writes that there are 5 factors that contribute to our happiness. 1, positive emotion and pleasure. 2, achievement. 3, relationship. 4, engagement. 5, meaning. And then when our daily actions fulfill a bigger purpose, the most powerful and enduring happiness can happen. So it's not to say that pleasure can't give us happiness, but how short-lived is it? And I could argue maybe that the bottom 4, the next 4, are more longer lasting than just this positive emotion and pleasure. Because I could give you that just from giving you a phone, and you can swipe through a phone watching back-to-back videos, music, what have you, TikTok posts, Twitter posts. But by nature of you having to keep scrolling and keep watching the next thing, each successive thing is short-lived. And that's why you need the next thing. The positivity from it or the pleasure from it is so short-lived that you have to go to the next thing. But I could argue that those next four, the achievement, you achieve something, hey, you have that for the rest of your life. You've worked hard towards it. It's a little bit longer lasting. Same thing, relationship, engagement, meaning, etc. So what is financially wealthy? This is on page 142 of the book. And I like Gary's definition here of what financially wealthy is. And he says that what financially wealthy is having enough money coming in to work to finance their purpose in life. So it's not having $1 million. It's whatever money you need to finance your purpose in life. You're not going above your means just for the sake of having more money. No. I have this certain purpose in life, so I need this certain amount of money, and I don't really need much more than that because it's not helping the situation by having more of it, so to speak. That's what Gary writes on page 142. And he also writes that if you want more money to continue to make you happy, for more money to continue to make you happy, you have to figure out why you want more. Else it's not going to make you happy having more. You're going to end up just chasing the money. And that's where purpose comes in. Because with purpose, you get clarity and conviction. You have a direction that you need to go. And you don't have a lost compass, you don't have a compass, or you're not sitting there looking at a compass and wondering where you have to go. When you have a purpose, you know exactly where you have to go. I remember Stephen Covey talking about this concept of a compass versus a Ferrari. Like, would you rather have the direction, or would you rather have the speed to get to a destination as fast as possible? Because you could be in the Ferrari, you could go in 200 miles, but you could be going the wrong way. But when you have the purpose, you've got your direction, clear on it, you're sure about it. Other decisions in your life become so much easier. We talked about this with the focusing question. When you ask yourself the focusing question, it narrows down everything else. It makes prioritizing your day so much easier. And then when things get challenging, you can endure that struggle of the challenge a lot better because you know your purpose, you know why you're doing it, and you know that when you come out on the other side and you get the result, it's all going towards your one thing. And as the last bullet point says there, the focusing question helps to bring purpose in your life. So the big ideas to conclude: happiness happens on the way to fulfillment. And this was something Viktor Frankl talked about. If you guys remember back to Man's Search for Meaning, is happiness shouldn't be the goal. It's always the results of something else. Right? You shouldn't. It's like when you go to sleep. I remember he talked about this too in Man's Search for Meaning. You shouldn't try to fall asleep. You should try to stay up as long as you can. Because just by nature of trying to fall asleep, like you're putting forth effort toward this thing, and then you end up staying up later and later and later. Because it's kind of like all you think about. It like messes with your brain a little bit, but instead if you just try to stay up, naturally your body's going to fall asleep. If you just work towards these certain goals, naturally happiness is going to happen. Next, discover your big why. Discover that purpose, the bottom of the iceberg. And how can you discover your purpose? That's a good question, man. You could ask a focusing question. I guess it's really just asking. The focusing question I think would help, but it's also just what makes you excited in your life. What do you want to be remembered by, maybe, etc. Asking yourself those questions. Remember, extraordinary answers require an extraordinary question. And then lastly, absent an answer, pick a direction. So when you pick a direction, you start marching down it, see how you like it. If you don't like it, after a certain amount of time, you can change your direction. It's never too late. It's almost never too late. But it's worse to stand still. What's that quote? The best thing to do is the right thing. The worst thing to do is the wrong, or the best thing to do is the right thing. The next best thing is the wrong thing. The worst thing is nothing at all. I remember one time when I was in class in college and I answered a question using that quote, and I felt so good about myself. Like, oh, yes, what a smart quote for this class at 9 a.m. where all these other kids are just not paying attention at all. But I knew. I recognized it, and I felt good about it. But pleasure. That was for pleasure because that was short-lived. I didn't really have a purpose back then. So to tie it back into the one thing, that's going to wrap it up, everybody. Thank you so much. Next time, we'll be going over Chapter 14, Living by Priority. So today we talked about purpose, the bottom of the iceberg. Now we're talking about the next level up of the iceberg, living with priority. And I do have a blog post out. Check that out. I've got a new blog post out. I'll put that in the description of the video. And guys, thank you very much. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care.